Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages. You have come to the most awesome talk show created by the people for the people. This is the First Amendment podcast. I am your host, Ace, and today we are going to touch up on a very important topic or set of topics that pretty much every single human in this planet, and maybe even outside the planet. I haven't been out there, but I'm hoping the cancer hasn't gone outside of the planet just yet. We need to fix it while it's here. Here to talk about to help me talk about the show is a very smart man. His name is Strider. Please help me welcome Strider to the show. Strider, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem, Strider. So we're going to talk about something or some things that have been affecting pretty much the whole world when it comes to what the world was 2 years ago. Even I mean, I wanted to go all the way back to 10 years, but even prior to 2 years ago, the world was a bit different. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So what do
Yeah.
you think? What do you think is haunting us as humans? And I'm not talking about the rich and famous. I'm talking about like individuals like you and I. I don't know the teenagers or young adults that work in McDonald's, the parents that take their kids to public schools, the truck drivers that are religious or non-religious that don't want mandates. I mean, it's a lot of things. So what do you think is pretty much the biggest thing that has made us or the biggest thing that's haunting us today, or one of the biggest things at least?
Oh man, that's a loaded question, dude. um, I guess it really depends on like where you're at, right? Like what part of the country you're at, like for sure. And then also like what you got going on. So I'll give an example. So like I'm in California, right? And California, if you've spent any time here in the last 2 years, especially, and you've gone anywhere outside of California, and I'm talking anywhere besides New York or Seattle, for example, or Chicago, then I'm sure you've seen that it's very different. Um, and I think one of the things that's really different is just, I mean, it all starts with this pandemic, you know, like how this thing played out and the way that different states, different jurisdictions, different places are handling it. And depending on where you're at, I'm sure your outlook is completely different. You
So
know,
with that being said, Strider, let me jump in there really quick.
mhm.
With that with that being said, since you brought that up, as a nation, right? Because we have a president, we have a leader, and that's the person who represents all of us.
Mhm.
Why do you think the president didn't just take it upon himself? And I see it as, governors and mayors, they're pretty much the managers of the store, right? If you're talking about retail managers, area managers when it comes to warehouses, and you have the CEO, I don't know, Jeff Bezos or the Waltons, which is basically our president. So why do you think the president didn't take it upon himself to just tell the managers to do things the way they should have been done as a whole, instead of just letting the mayors and the governors pretty much govern and mandate or not mandate their own states and cities?
So I think a lot of that is the way that the founding fathers and the way that um, when they put this country together, right? They had seen throughout history how tyrannical rule is a detriment to a country. I mean, at the time, right during the Revolutionary War and before that, there had been things had been simmering up to a boiling point, and one of the things that the founding fathers knew back then, and they were all very well versed in philosophy and governments and the way the machine worked, I guess you could say. And one of the things they wanted was to have states have some autonomous control, where that they could basically be the masters of their own universe. And I really adhere to that. I think it's a really smart philosophy because the way that one region can be controlled or the way that one region can be run can be completely different than another, and it really it's so different by design, right? So I'll give you an example. With this pandemic, right? Regardless of where you're at with it, I think it's really completely different to see that, like, if you're in a place like LA, for example, which to this day, we're in a Tuesday, I guess you could call it today, right? It's the TWO because this is the twos across the board. Um, LA still has the strictest mandate requirements. I'm talking vaccines and also like the way they lock down, the way to move around and everything are still to this day some of the strictest in the entire country. You go to somewhere like Nebraska, for example, and they're very, very different. Part of the reason I think that, um, the president at the time and maybe even the president now has looked at it is that, like, well, these are two totally different regions. You can't really govern them the same way. And so that power got sent back to the states for them to handle. And honestly, it makes sense, right? Um, like if you've ever heard back in World War II, right? The way that the German army back then used to fight was that every major decision when it came to war, it went straight back to the top, right? To the Fuhrer. Well, that bit him in the butt at the very end, right? When regional commanders in different places, like, they needed to handle stuff their way, right? Like the guys in the field see things that the guys at the top don't. And so it's easier sometimes to let local commanders or local places handle their thing the way they do, for better or worse, right? I'm sure we've seen like the things that have been happening the last 2 years, right? Some regions have been completely open, right? And I'm just
Right.
going to be blunt. They have very little problems compared to places that have completely locked down. Like, the problems are completely different, but the way that they tackled it, you could see the effects now. I mean, we have 2 years worth of data. We have 2 years worth of like the way these things played out. And I'll tell you, to be honest, man, like, I've been to LA during this time, and I was also able to go down to Miami. And holy crap, man, they could not be like more different. And I saw a lot more smiling faces out in Miami, I'll tell you, than I do here. And that really boils down to like letting the local governors and the local state officials handle things their way based on what they're seeing. So I think that's kind of where that played out. It's a long answer, but I think I think it was a smart thing to do, because like you can't treat people the same. Like, people like to say, like, if you live, especially here in California, right? Like, it's like a national pastime to talk crap on Californians, right? For anyone
Right.
outside of here. And like when you see that, it's like, oh, well, why would you do that? Well, people assume, like when I was in the military years ago, right? They used to call me Hollywood, but it was anyone from California and they called it Hollywood. And if you've ever been out there, like, that's kind of offensive to me, man. It's like, dude, no one in Hollywood is from Hollywood, first off, and
Yeah.
secondly, that's where all the weirdos are at.
Yeah.
But like out there, it's like, well, that doesn't represent Norco. Hollywood doesn't represent Mammoth Lakes. It doesn't represent Fresno or anything. They're completely different. So, I mean, even in LA, right? Like LA, we call it gangland, right? It's like one neighborhood to the next is totally different. So I think it's smart to be able to like separate like the way you think it should all work and then the way like it is over there. And like I say, we got 2 years worth of data now. And personally, places with the lockdowns had the most issues and still are paying for it now. That's another story.
Right. So would you
So
say that regarding these places that have enforced the lockdowns, I mean, I've noticed it's mostly larger cities, right? Mostly larger cities where they have the strong mandates and defund the police and let the people control, what they need to control. Do you think it might be kind of uh um I don't want to say double standards, but kind of ironic that people want to add more stuff to their own city, but yet they're burning it down literally and metaphorically. Do you think that that's going to cause a problem, and it's going to pretty much spread to the smaller cities, and not only to the smaller cities but around the world?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've noticed, right? And again, like this is 2 years worth of data, right? I'm a data guy. I'm an engineer, like that's my normal job. And I look at numbers and patterns, like, and there's a saying, right? Like, I may not always believe in conspiracy theories, but when I see things happening over and over, it makes me wonder, you know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like how things are now, right? Well, where you've seen, for the most part, I'm sure there's one or two examples where it's probably different, but for the most part, the way the lockdowns played out, the places that had the harshest lockdowns weren't necessarily the big cities. It was the big cities with a certain political affiliation. You know, we like to call them the red or the blue states, right?
Right.
For the most part, it's almost like to a T, man. The states that were blue, and I'm talking Democratic states, that went hard in the paint, dude. Like we're talking California, New York, Illinois with Chicago, Washington with Seattle, um, Oregon, right,
Portland.
with Portland. Those are Hawaii as well. Those are the states that had some of the hardest lockdowns in the entire country. Some still do. Um, Everywhere else that was red didn't really play the same game. And there's a billion reasons for why, right? But it's almost like it's fascinating that oh man, I guess I'll just say like this is probably the most political virus in world history. And you see it almost to a T by the way that like the states and in some respects like in different countries as well. Like who votes what depended on what that state did. And we see
Mhm.
completely like to a T how they played it out.
Right. Kind of
Um
like a game of chess, right? Where
oh
they
yeah.
they they check their steps before they move, and then they move towards that that issue. So what they call it. Um,
Yeah.
but I want to ask you this, that now that you brought that up, the whole game, and this conversation is actually for Striders, for everyone out there listening. I mean, if you guys ever want to chime in, comment, question, add something, some sort of feedback, please feel free to come in. This talk show was created for you, for Strider, for myself, for the everyday person to come in and talk. Please reach us. Right now, we only have a Facebook page. In the future, we'll bring up a lot more other platforms for you to come reach us at. But both of our Messenger and Facebook links are on the Anchor or Spotify description of the podcast. Just scroll all the way down, click, and you can leave us a nice little message or a voice message on the actual Spotify or Anchor platforms. So this question is for you, Strider, and all of you guys out there. When it comes to the game, because we all know that, I don't want to say we all know, but a lot of the people that are hated by, let's say, individuals like the cancel culture or some administrations or whatever the case may be, that we think about things, and usually when you add two and two together, you usually get four. But when you say you got four, the cancel culture and other micromanaging groups of, at least in the United States, they tell you it's not four.
Mhm.
If you say it's four, you're wrong. And you need to get canceled because you don't know that it's actually five or six or seven or eight, whatever they want to say, right?
Mhm.
So, individuals like you and I, and people that actually question things, not doubt, I don't want to say doubt, but question things, because knowledge is power. So, we need to question things. Um, do you think that this pandemic has taken to the point of, where people thought they were dying, and obviously now that we're waking up and death is inevitable. I don't want to say that people haven't died from the pandemic. I mean, obviously, people die from all kinds of different things, maybe even including the pandemic. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but do you think this was a political move when it comes to where we're at and the fear that has been infested in all of us. Because right now, to be honest with you, Strider, I'm listening to these commercials on the radio talking about, hey, you've been a great parent so far. Why don't you give the booster shot and the injection to your kids? You've been great so far. And I've been a salesman before, so I
Mhm,
kind of sort of know how to pull legs.
mhm.
Um, do you think they've taken it overboard with this whole agenda?
Um, there is I can't remember the name right now. Uh, his name escapes me, but there was I think it was the mayor of Chicago from several years ago, and there's a quote that he had, and it was became really famous, and it became almost like a mantra for the Democratic Party. And I say the Democratic Party because they use it quite a bit, and they've been using it, especially at the outset of this whole pandemic. And it's never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think one of the things that we've seen, right, and mind you, like I'm a data guy, right? I got to look back and I got to see like the picture, not for what it is, but how all these things kind of fit together. And I think it's almost too convenient, right? When you see the things that have happened and there are other things being pushed at the same time, right? I was telling my friend, and we're at opposite ends of like the whole, the way this whole thing played out and the whole pandemic. And it seems like it only took 2 years and all these things to keep happening over again. Where I think he's kind of come around to my end of it. Not saying I'm right, but like I say, when I see certain things happen over and over, I tend to think this is on purpose. Um, but I remember saying at the very beginning, right? We were talking about it, and I was like, man, like I don't know. Again, like I need data. I need something to show me that like there's a reason for this. And I remember saying, like, dude, like, I don't know about these lockdowns, man. Like, they're not making sense. And it wasn't so much that, like, it was just the policies that was part of it, but it was the things that they were pushing at the same time. Like, you're telling me, and I'm talking like at the small scale, right? That, like, when I go to 7-Eleven, that a plastic shield is going to save you from, like, you know, bio organic material going back and forth between a
Right.
human. I'm like, 100 years ago. This is why like it kind of upsets me, man. 100 years ago, we went through the Spanish flu, right? This is on top of World War One, which was happening at the same time, and a whole lot of political instability around the planet. But like, we learned 100 years ago, even in the most remote places of the world, with people that were masking, that were separated from all of society, you still had people getting sick for this thing. The audacity that we can sit here and say, and maybe I'm jumping ahead of the gun here, but the audacity that we can say that a plastic shield is going to save us kind of like didn't make sense to me. And there were a lot of policies that were happening as well. I mean, I'm sure you remember, dude. Like I remember sitting with my friend, and we used to go to this bar. It was in Islands, but, grab a beer, eat some food, and we watch like, sports like hockey or basketball or whatever. And we used to do it during the week every once in a while. And it's almost 2 years ago that this happened because it was around what was it? St. Patty's Day, right when the first lockdown started coming down.
Right.
And I remember, like at the time, they were saying on the news, like, "Oh, we're thinking about this. There's a case here and there, like in one state or another," and they were going all crazy. And it was almost like fascinating that they were telling us right in our face, right? They were showing us video coming out of China of people dropping on the streets, people dying, and you're like, "Oh man, this is crazy," right? But they weren't telling us so much of like what was happening. It was more like we have to do this or, you know, we're all going to die basically. And fear, man, fear the motivating factor.
Right.
And
Well, I mean, most people don't know that stress is worse than people think. I mean, if it makes your hair fall and it makes your heart pump a lot faster, then there's something going on with that whole fear. So, um,
right, Right. And there was a lot of unknowns, right? Like we didn't know everything that was happening, right? But I think a lot of it, we know now, especially 2 years later, right, that the media was compromised and there were a lot of problems with the reporting that was happening. They weren't being very honest with a lot of things. But it was almost really strange when, from March, like around St. Patty's Day, to about a month or two later, when people are going home, right? Like to this day, I still work from home with my job, but like people started working from home. I remember it looking like a movie, dude, where I actually drove out during that time and there was no one on the roads. There was nothing happening. And it was crazy. And I remember talking to my friend at the time, and I was like, this is strange, man. This doesn't make any sense to me because throughout all history, especially 100 years ago when the Spanish flu happened, uh, and all these other pandemics that have happened since then, why would you quarantine an entire population when you only quarantine the sick? We've known this for throughout almost all recorded history, right? In fact,
Right.
the term relates to that, quarantining the sick. And, our leaders decided to shut everything down. And I remember telling my friend at the time, like, this is going to be bad, man, because I get that, like, in theory, they want to stop this thing. But, if the machine stops working, and I'm talking about the economy, uh, like people's lives, all these things stop moving, the effects are going to be huge, massive. And if this thing is really as bad as they say it is, right? And I was just bringing this up back then, but if this is really as bad as they say it is, then it's going to take the world to come together to try to like stop this, right? And
Right.
one of the things that is going to be affected the most, and I knew this because we saw it 10 years ago, right, when the financial collapse happened, right? I used to use WAMU, right? We all use Washington Mutual and all this stuff. And overnight, man, that bank collapsed. I had friends that lost their houses. Things happened around the planet. It was bad. This was going to be worse, you know? And so I remember thinking, like, if this is really as bad as it is, and I was doubting it at the time because it didn't make any sense, especially a lot of the policies. And we can get into that later. But I was like, if this is really true, the institutions that are going to have to back off and really come together, to me, in my mind, were the financial institutions, all the banks, credit card companies, all these things are going to have to be like, hey, dude, like, in order to save the world, let's stop collecting rent. Let's stop charging people their bills. Let's stop putting interest, like, just to save the world, right? And you know what? That didn't happen. In fact, they went even further and they decided to just keep it going. Now, there were places, like LA and other places that decided to start doing, uh, like they kind of held off on rent. This is where the government came in and said, like, hey, you can't collect rent because, like, this is bad, right? People are losing their jobs and stuff. Well, eventually someone's going to have to pay, right? And I remember telling my friend, if this is really as bad as it is, it's a worldwide pandemic that it's going to affect all of us, going to have long-term reaching effects. Do you think money is going to matter when there's people dying all over the place? Well, he was like, nah, man, like, this is the way it's going to be. I said, I don't know, dude. It doesn't make any sense to me. Well, here we are 2 years later. And what's happened since then? We've had the largest transfer of wealth in human history because they never stopped. They kept going for the money. And we're seeing that at every turn almost, money and power has been at the center of this thing. Probably more so than the actual virus. It's fascinating, man. And again, I'm not saying I'm right at everything because there's always opinion involved and like facts as well. But when you keep seeing these things happen over and over, and especially seeing like the rich get a hell of a lot richer in these last 2 years, it really about the virus? I don't know, man. Because
Right.
like I say, if you go somewhere that didn't have the same policies as where you're at now, like if someone in LA went to Florida like I did, and you saw that like oh no, like we're not wearing a mask or something. Like the sky is gonna fall, and it didn't. In fact, their case numbers have been low this entire time. And regardless, even if the case numbers were high, the death rates were really low, which is really what like we know, like is really what matters. But two completely different policies. And I know a lot of people here that lost their jobs. I know a lot of people here that are financially devastated. And the last time I checked, you know, the CEOs of these corporations got a hell of a lot richer, especially big pharma. That's another story. But it's crazy, man. Like it didn't make sense to me back then. And I think now we're seeing that there was a lot of failures across the board, um, especially with policies and all these other things. And now, almost overnight, man, like places like LA and stuff, they're dropping mandates like it's like it didn't even happen. And it's like, what changed? I thought we were all about science, but there were a lot of things that didn't really play out that way.
Yeah.
So sorry to go off on that, man, but it's just
No, it's your
it's
time,
crazy.
buddy. It's your time. It's you're actually enlightening us with a lot of information that I personally, I when I first created the talk show, this is what I wanted people to talk about because um I mean, I'm pretty sure you've seen people out there. We're sheep, man. We're redirected to wherever, the rest of the herd goes because of the person that's redirecting us, in this case the people. So I'm actually glad that you're talking about that. So like basically what you're saying is, if they feed you a platter of poop but they put or droppings or whatever, and they put some whipped cream on it and they tell you it's ice cream, you're going to eat it. That's what we're doing right now, even
Yeah.
if we know it doesn't smell very good and it tastes kind of weird. We're still going to eat it because so and so told us it was cake. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of our biggest problems, dude. Like, I think we need more people like yourself to reinstate the idea that, it's two and two should add four and not any other number like they're telling us. It's like I always say, you can't ask a liar if he's telling the truth. What is he
Mm,
going to tell you? Right.
right.
So that's another topic I wanna hit in the future. Hopefully, you can come back, and that's folks out there, mandates. If you guys have any opinions on the mandates, whether they're here, whether they're in Australia, Canada, I think those are hot spots as well. Please comment, join our show. And that's a big one. So we're gonna have to save that, mandates for next time. But
Oh yeah.
as
I'm
far
all
as
in, dude.
we're gonna get into this one because politics. I spoke to Strider before, and I told you, Strider, that I was never into politics. I'm still not into politics. But when politics catch up with you, you have to turn around. You have to turn
Mm,
around and figure out what's going on because they caught up. And I believe that this is caught up to all of us. I'm talking about your children have are being affected by this right now. It's sad to me, and I know a lot of you guys out there have a different view on things. So I encourage you guys to come and talk to me about this because I really don't understand how how I can sit there and watch, try to see little kids play on the playground with a damn face diaper. Okay, that's just me though. I mean, if you guys think it's useful, like I said, come talk on the show. This show is all about respect. That is rule number one, and the only rule I have is respect the individual. So come on and talk. Nobody's going to cancel you. So as far as all that, Strider, it's basically. Would you say it's basically become a political game that they're playing to have some sort of end game or some sort of profit towards the rich? Because I know exactly what you mean. A wise man once told me that the only thing that hasn't changed within 2 years is the money the rich is getting. And if it has changed, it's gotten up. And I
oh yeah.
agree. I've worked in a lot of places. I work for a lot of big companies. I don't want to say any names, but big companies that while mom and pop shops were losing their business. I mean, dude, like these people bleed and sweat for these stores, right? Their whole lives. And you have, big companies that are getting triple, quadruple the money that they used to get before the pandemic started. Um, do you believe that there might be some sort of other other I want to say benefit for the rich. I mean, mainly for the rich, right? Because the poor, we've been losing. Inflation's gone up. So
Hmm.
I go to the gas station and, gas for my little four bangers, $5. And
Hmm.
I lose my week's paycheck there. So I mean, they probably don't even need gas, right? They have some other sort of uh, you know, ways of flying and going on the going through the water to get to wherever they're at. And usually the rich don't drive. So do you think they're profiting off of well, that's obvious, but do you think there's some sort of other agenda other than just the main pandemic? Do you believe that the vaccinations had something to do with that end game rather than the actual pandemic itself?
Yeah. So, like I said, there's that old quote by I can't remember, Rahm Emanuel. That's his name. He was the mayor of Chicago for a while. That's who the quote came from. Where he said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And I think when you start looking at the numbers and things that have happened, and I'm talking like the reality of what happened and not what the news tells you, because most of the news, they're all like five major networks, right? Or five companies that own almost every network in America, that spews a lot of the same crap. You can change the channels and you're going to get the same thing no matter where you go, same talking points. But um, when this pandemic kicked off, and it happened like two or three times, right? There were a couple spending bills that were passed by the Senate. The way that it was being phrased, right, was that this is a COVID relief bill, right? And you had numbers that are like, they're comical, dude. Like these are like comic book numbers, and like, you have Dr. Evil or something say like, I want, $9 billion. Why have billions when you can have trillions? And they're pulling out, these loans, which, let's be honest, these loans we're gonna have to pay for the rest of our lives. Our kids, our kids, and probably when the sun's out, just died out in a billion years, like, they're still going to be paying these numbers. They're paying massive amounts of money that we just can't afford. When you're talking like a 1.5 to $4 trillion bills, spending bills, that's pretty insane. But the way that these things were phrased, right, is that these bills were going to be for COVID relief. But when you actually look at the numbers, it was something like 8%. It was like 8 to 10% of that was actually for COVID. The rest was lining the pockets of, different corporations, um, different financial institutions and whatever. What does that have to do with COVID? So when you start looking at the numbers, where things are moving around, it wasn't making any sense. And that kind of thing like was really bothering me, like when you sit here and tell me that let's go ahead and you're going to have this pandemic in the middle of an election year, right? This is 2019, and these things are super dangerous, right? Like we don't want anyone going out. But like a month or two later, after this thing kicks off, we have the BLM riots kick off, and almost every talking head, Dr. Fauci, Birx, all these people that are supposed to be our health officials were really quiet about it. And it was really obvious to me, because a lot of times things don't happen for no reason. But a lot of these things were being politically driven. But they were really quiet about people en masse on the streets of LA, which makes no sense to me, right? Because this is all the George Floyd stuff, which was in St. Louis, a totally different state, totally different thing. But you had people en masse like getting together in the middle of a pandemic, and our health officials were completely silent about it. It didn't make any sense. Like I can't walk into a supermarket without three masks, two pairs of underwear, three pairs of socks, two condoms, and a butt plug. But somehow they can have these riots and these massive protests, and it's like nothing happened. It didn't make any sense. And when you start looking at these things, stepping back and looking at these things as a bigger picture, um, well, what's the real reason behind it, right? And it became so political to me, like so obviously political, that I think it was really obvious that there was a huge agenda for this. And it's still kind of the same, you know, like I say, depending on how you vote, like your states or even your city councils, right? Like that really determined how the policies in your place actually went down. And it's really crazy. It's almost like right along party lines. And
Right.
um and that happened all around the country. Um
So
I can't say the world because it's a little different outside of here, but that frame of thinking was pretty consistent all the way through.
no, I hear you. I do agree. So with that being said, but I want to ask you a question that has probably been in the minds of most people that watch the news, or every person that watches the news, because it's everywhere. And it's a question for all you out there as well. Everything that you hear here is for all you guys out there. So go ahead and chime in. I encourage you to join the talk, the people's talk. This is all for you. But the question is, or let's say the title is misinformation. So here's what I want to ask. What is misinformation? Because, and I'm going to tell you why I'm asking this, because like I said, people like Joe Rogan, people that have their own mind, people that kind of go against what the pandemic has been, which is something that I used to do back in 2019, right? Or 2020. The beginning of 2020, I would tell people that the
Mm-hmm.
it was not going to end with one wonder drug. Dude, I remember I've lost a lot of, friends and maybe a significant other here and there that, we were pretty close, because I would tell them that in November, they would tell all of us that in November there was going to be this wonder drug. And I told them, I kind of laughed and said that that's not going to stop there.
Mm-hmm.
So even then people tried to virtually behead me, or not be my friends because of my misinformation. And then what happened? 2021 kicked in, and then you got another dose, right? 22 kicks in, and you got a double mask, maybe two more booster shots in the future. So what is misinformation? Because from what I know, the CDC and the WHO, back in the day when the WHO was in all this mess as well, they would tell us that we should not wear masks because only masks are only for professionals, right? So there will be enough for doctors, for nurses, for people that are in healthcare, and you don't need to wear masks. And then they told us wear a scarf, wear a scarf, put your shirt over your face, you'll be fine. Now we've gotten to the point where I don't remember the name, but it's like N70 or N74K special masks that we have to wear.
95.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go at 95. And
Mm-hmm.
it's where are we going with this? Like this whole misinformation thing, we've been right about, but back in the day when we would inform people about this, we'd get canceled. And when like for example, when Joe Rogan brought his doctors in and he was telling us what is probably the truth. I mean, I don't know. I can't really say what's going to happen in the future, but they're trying to cancel him, and they try to cancel other people who are saying that, there's other ways that you can beat, or that I've beaten. They say in a personal way that I've beaten COVID and I survived, and they try to pretty much virtually behead those people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what's the end game? Like what is misinformation? Because it's thrown around like a dirty rag, you know what I mean? So like what do you think about all that?
It's funny because honestly, if you step back and really look at it for what it is, it's really misinformation is what someone else thinks is wrong. That's really what it boils down to, you know. Because you always gotta. I like to say, like when uh when someone's like telling you something, right? I always tell my buddies like consider the source because I'll tell you what, man, like it's really easy to hear something and if you don't really question it or if you don't really process it in the right way, um, it's easy just to like for it to fly over your head and be like, yep, I take it as fact. I like to say this generation now is the Google generation because they'll look something up and they'll find out right away what the answer is without even questioning it. and it may be wrong for all we know. And that's really dangerous. And I think really what misinformation is, the way that we're seeing it right now, right, is some supreme authority giving out information and saying that if you go against what we say, then you're instantly wrong, without any way of debating it. And I think that's a dangerous precedent, because what if they're right? I remember I remember I think sometimes, like, if you hear something, right, and it doesn't sound right, but if you know you're right, I mean, that's really what it is, right? You're either right or wrong. And when you hear things that are going on right now, I mean, it's almost comical, right? Like I say, especially COVID, man. COVID's probably been the thing that's bothered me the most in these last 2 years, because the amount of garbage that has been spewed out by the news blows my mind. Uh, we'll start with the mask thing, because you kind of brought that up. So when I was in the military, um, we had to do chem warfare training. Basically, everyone that's uh, pretty much everyone, but mainly for the people that either deploy or people that are like on a ready status, right? Like I was a crew chief, so I flew. We used to have these things called NORIs. They're nuclear operational readiness inspections, and we used to have to get all dressed up like in chem gear, and it was basically us training at least once a year, but sometimes more. We were assuming that like our base got attacked with a nuke or chemical warfare, and we'd have to put on this protective gear, and it was a suit, boots, mask, gloves, all these things. This was to protect us from like mustard gas or nerve agents or whatever, right? It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of gear that we'd have to put on. I mean, this thing is like pretty airtight. It's really hard to breathe. The mask you have has a seal around your face. Um, but the first thing they taught us was that you have to have the right mask. And the mask you have, it has to have the right container or the right canister for the type of gas that you're getting attacked from. What does that mean? That means that there is no one mask for everything. It's like the biggest lie that I think has been pushed these last 2 years, that you're telling me, and this is from my experience, that when it comes to biological and nerve agents, the stuff that I wore back then that I trained in, I should have just worn a paper mask and that would have saved my life. Oh, why didn't I know this? I mean, heaven help me, right? Like
A scarf.
a scarf, yeah. What do they call the neck gaiters? Like
Yeah.
you're telling me that the guys that were in World War One, right, in the middle of the Spanish flu, that were like running through the trenches when mustard gas canisters were blowing up around them, you know, they died violent deaths, right? All they needed was a cloth mask.
Yeah. Just take
You're
off your
telling,
gloves and, use your gloves. That's all you need, right?
yeah, man. Like, who would have thought, man? Like, God, dude, science, right? It's like the
Right.
biggest joke I've ever heard. Well, you want to know how much misinformation, like, where it's really coming from? It's usually from the people that are from the highest mountains yelling at you about it, because someone told me this and I didn't believe it until I started doing it myself. I remember my friends, he and I are kind of on the same page politically, especially because like we talk about this stuff going back and forth. And I remember I went with him to Home Depot, and he was at the checkout, and I kind of wandered off a little bit, and they had all these boxes of masks there. And where he lives, he's up in the high desert. They don't really enforce any of that stuff. It's like it's on your own. Like,
Yeah.
again, if you want to wear 8 masks, go ahead. Like, who's going to judge you? Well, I picked up a box of masks and I was looking at it, and he goes, "What are you doing, man?" He's like, "Are you going to buy those?" I'm like, "Nah, no, I'm just looking at it." He's like, "You're looking for the warning, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah." What he's talking about, and I challenge anyone to do this. Any box of masks you go buy, unless it's surgical grade masks, that's different. But even then, there's always an asterisk, right? But like every mask box that you buy, they all come with a warning, and they say something to the effect of, These masks do not prevent the transmission or spread of viruses and bacteria. That's huge. That's massive, dude. You're telling me that even with these things, the warning on them themselves, on these boxes, on the masks, they say that they won't even do what they're telling us they do. So what what's the truth, right? Well, and I've gotten in so many debates with people about this stuff. And the problem is that, like, when it comes to these masks, right? Like, again, I'm a data guy. I need to know like how these things work. But like, if we're doing stuff, if we're testing these things now, we can't do these things in a vacuum. Most of the mask tests that have come out in the last 2 years, that you always hear on the news, they're always referring to. I've read a lot of those reports. I've read through the studies. They're all done in a lab. They're all done on a mannequin, or they're all done like within some kind of vacuum, like a controlled environment. But that's not reality. That's not how things work when you and I walk around the store. If you and I walk to Walmart, it's not the same as being in a lab where there's a controlled airflow and all this stuff. Like, nah, that's not how it works, dude. Well, there was a study done about a year and a half ago, and it came out of Denmark, and it's to this day one of the only and largest um, independent studies that it tested how masks, efficacy of masks, whether they worked or not, and it was tested over the course of like 4 or 5 months, something like that, and it tested like something like, I think it was like 10 to 15,000 people, and it tested two control groups: people that wore masks, people that didn't. And it tells you, like, all these studies tell you their conclusion right at the beginning. It's actually fascinating. They always tell you right at the beginning. It says basically like it didn't matter whether you wore masks or not. They found out that people that wore them daily, that were always like following the science, and the folks that weren't, it didn't matter. You were still going to get sick. Now, when you look at things the way they happen, right? You say, okay, well, I didn't get sick, but my friend did, right? It's because he didn't wear a mask. Like, how do we know that? Because the thing is, you're either sick or you're not. And when you get sick, it's because like that virus or the bacteria that's infected you has gotten to a point where it's replicated as many times that it now affects your body, and your body goes into repair mode. But you and I are getting hit by stuff all the time. We just don't know it. And especially if you have a pretty decent immune system, stuff slides off you, man. Like, you wouldn't even know. As like, you go to the market tomorrow, you could walk by someone that has pneumonia and you wouldn't know it, right? You could
Right.
get hit with it, but if your body knows how to fight it, then you'll be none the wiser, right? Our bodies have memory cells, T and C cells, right? These cells, like, they stay in your memory banks and they can fight off, future infections, especially if it comes back. But that's the thing, is that we've kind of like completely lost it, and we've put all these faith into, like, these health experts, many of which are compromised, let's be honest. um Especially when there's money behind them. I'll get into that in a second, but like, they're the ones telling you what's right or wrong, but most of the time they don't even give you a reason, you know so what's misinformation? It's really like the people telling you what they think is wrong. But one thing that always gets lost is that they're, and that sometimes gets lost, and I think it's really dangerous to be telling people things that aren't true. Like I said, like, when we were, wearing that heavy gear, right, for like the chem warfare trials and stuff we do, we used to wear these tape bands around us, and these tape bands, they reacted with stuff in the air. So depending on like what chemical hit it, it would change color. We could see that. They would tell us which colors, would turn green or red, these different spots. We could see it with our eyes. We can't see COVID, man. COVID, the particles for COVID are so small. I mean, it's like microns, dude. The mask that you wear, even up to N95 or N100, someone said that like COVID particles going through a mask is like, what is it, like, It's something like a fly going through a chain link fence. It's basically the
Oh,
same type of thing. Like,
that is crazy.
yeah, it's like it's not even like helpful, because you know what most of these masks are for, especially surgical masks? They're meant for when doctors are like operating on someone. They're meant that they don't spit on them, that they don't release crap into an open body. You know, that's really what they were meant for. They weren't meant for stopping viruses. You ever see like photos of like movies where there's like an alien that comes to this planet or something? What are they wearing? Like the scientists or the doctors, when they have to go see this alien or something like a crashed plane, are they wearing a paper mask across their face? Hell no, dude. They're wearing full body containment suits.
Yes.
That's how you stop or at least slow down, from getting contaminated from biological agents. It's not with a paper mask. It's ludicrous, dude. So sorry to get all heated, man, but it's just like it's
No, no, I get you. I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I usually, try to limit what I say on the talk show because I don't want people to think that I'm against them. I want everyone from every walk of life to come and talk. Whether it's you, whether it's a person that doesn't believe what you're saying or a person that believes in what you're saying. But I gotta say, I totally agree. I totally agree with you. I think the human body is we don't give it enough credit. We don't give it enough credit because our immune system is great. And that's another topic. And I'm going to say it here now, but we'll probably touch up on this topic on the next episode. But I wanted to talk. It has partially, it has something to do with this, but I wanted to
well,
talk about
I,
this
I
as
do
well.
I do want to add this, like just to
Sure.
close on the misinformation thing, and not to cut you off, but I do want to say this: how you brought up Joe Rogan, right?
Right.
One of the things that came up on misinformation on that, right? And this is what the media was saying, and the White House, which I don't want to get into that, but their tag for misinformation against Joe Rogan was because he had the audacity, the gall, to have on doctors like Robert Malone, who is like basically the inventor of the mRNA vaccine technology that we use now for all these vaccines. Well, most of them, not all of them are mRNA, and several other doctors that were willing to talk openly and candidly about the policies and the things that are going on now. I don't know about you, man, but like I don't have a doctorate in medicine. And even if I didn't, right, it doesn't really matter. Like I that argument of authority where it's like, oh, they're a doctor, they know better than you. It's kind of gotten ludicrous because you have doctors telling people how to live their life. It's like, okay, well, you don't know what I do, and nor should you set policies because you're looking at things in a vacuum. But like to sit here and say that these people don't even have the right to say anything because what they're saying is wrong, you know, this is where we're at when it comes to this misinformation thing. It's kind of a joke. It's really just I think it's a tagline to basically like shut down conversation, you know.
Yeah, we see that a lot. We see that a lot nowadays, not only on that, point of view or on that topic, but when it comes to everything that I think they're controlling. But I don't know if you will agree, but when it comes to like the whole BLM riots, if you don't support BLM, I'm not saying I do or I don't. I'm just saying when people don't support it, they call them racist, or when people don't support LGBTQ, they call them homophobic or whatever. I think you're right. It is just a tag that people want to tag it. No, in a warehouse scene, we call it tag and lock or lock and
Mhm.
tag. Yeah, I think it's called tag and lock. So whenever you lock something and you tag it, you can't touch it, and
Mhm.
that's the same thing that we're experiencing today. Um, Today in the world. So we do have a few more minutes left, sadly. But anything you want to leave us with? I mean, you've left us with a bunch of knowledge, Strider. But and I'm gonna ask you, if you'd like to come to a further the next episode because I wanted to touch up on a few things that we were talking about earlier. But for now, do you want to leave these nice folks with anything, any type of advice with the masks, with anything you might have in mind?
Yeah, just I think one of the things that has come up um over the years, and it's I think gotten worse, is that knowledge is power. And I think being able to think critically about things is something it's almost like a lost art now, you know. Um Back then when like we were kids, right? And I'm probably dating myself, but back when I was a kid and I would go to 7-Eleven and see Mortal Kombat, right? Um we would have all these, like, as a kid, we'd all have these wild theories of like these combos or like secrets in the game and stuff like that because we didn't know. And like something like that, because we didn't have the internet back then, right? We didn't have like a phone in our pocket or none of this stuff where we could look this stuff up. And so like it became really hard to like know what was true, but it opened up conversations. And now the way things are, or the way that like media, uh corporations like Google and stuff like that are pushing, is that like you're going to get your answer, like it or not, even if it's the wrong answer. And I think people really need to go back to start thinking critically. If it doesn't sound right, just don't just believe it. Start questioning it. Question everything. If you hear something that doesn't sound right, I mean, look into it. Like, we talked about the BLM riots, like the name Black Lives Matter, right? That was like the whole tagline, that if you didn't agree with that statement, then, you're a racist and you're evil and all that. Well, regardless of whether you agreed with it or not, like they burned down half the country that year, you know? And like I saw a lot of people lose businesses, people's lives were destroyed because of that. Like, what did that have to do with anything? Like, just because it's said doesn't mean you have to believe it. So I just encourage everyone to just question things. If it doesn't sound right, start thinking twice, we're seeing around the country right now that, and around the world, that a lot of things that are being told to us aren't always as they seem. And I think you're seeing a lot of people wake up to that fact that, you know what, this is really messed up. Like we look at things like a lot of these really harsh policies that were put on children, especially here in Southern California, for wearing masks. They're pushing vaccines on these kids and all these things. When we know children are the least vulnerable, we've known this from the first year that the pandemic hit. And yet they're going hard on the paint for it. And then we find out a year later, this was last year, that it turns out that the school unions were working with the CDC and the NIH directly to basically form policy. What does that have to do with anything? A lot of times looking into these things or questioning these things will really start to expose things for what they are, not what they seem, but really what they are. And I just encourage everyone, like, you know, sometimes if you hear something you don't like, don't just blow it off. Maybe think about it. Maybe you go like, hey, maybe there's some truth to this. It wasn't that long ago that, you know, we were being told something totally different, and then once you see things with your own eyes, it's a little different. So yeah, that's all I got to say, like, at least for now. I just encourage everyone to be open and not be afraid of each other too. You know, we'll be here before and we'll be here after, but yeah, let's hope that we can come together and we can go back to 2019 again. The year I miss
Beautiful.
so
Yes.
much.
Yes, it was a good time back then, before all this canceling you, canceling me and this and that. But yeah, that was a beautiful message. I agree with it 100%. As a matter of fact, Strider, I always tell the folks out there that are listening, question. I mean, even if you believe in something, it's not bad to question what you believe in every once in a while because you may be wrong. You remember back in the day when people used to say that the world was flat and people questioned it and now it's round, right?
Hmm.
People question when people question, people come to what's real. I do agree with my buddy Strider here. This world was built on the people who question not only others but themselves. Sometimes you may be your worst enemy, and sometimes your mind might be clouded by certain things here and there. We're emotional creatures. Question what you do. before you create a fact in your mind, because it may not be a fact in reality.
Right.
So I want to take a little bit of time because my buddy Strider here, he has a magazine, pretty awesome magazine. Strider, I don't know if you want to enlighten the folks out here about your magazine.
Yeah, sure. So I have a magazine. It's called Spectrum Magazine. It's a lifestyle and culture magazine. We talk about a little bit of everything. Not so much politics and all that, but more like things that are happening around the planet, locally and around the planet. Things that we think are pretty awesome, and people that are pretty awesome, and things that maybe if you had a certain hobby or things you like, maybe you can kind of look into it. Um, like whether it's cars or food or music or anything. Um, that's kind of what we talk about, and it's a bit of a passion project. It's been fun, but our main goal behind it is really to tell stories of the people behind these things. When I was in the military, and I know some of the same people, but I used to go to some really cool places, and when I would come back, I would tell them about it, and like I'm sure they thought I was gloating and all that. It's like I wasn't. I was just so excited to talk about the place I went, and more often than not, like they'd kind of look at me like, "Oh, okay, I guess." It's like, man, I wish I could bring you. I could have taken you there with me, right? When I went to Guam or to Spain or something like that. I wish you were there with me. So the whole point of this was like, we want to take you along for the ride, kind of like give you a little taste what it's like there or what the people are like and the stories behind it. So that's what we are, and it's Spectrum with a K.
That's awesome. That, do you have any links that you can maybe we could, the people, the folks out there can go to and check out your magazine?
Yeah, we're pretty much on everything. It's spectrummagazine.com, and that's with the K. That's one word, no spaces. And then we're on Instagram. It's at Spectrum Magazine. Same thing, one big word, no spaces. We're on Twitter and Facebook and everything. Yeah, just look us up, Spectrum with a K. You'll find us. It's pretty easy to
Awesome.
find us.
Awesome. I've actually checked it out myself, folks. So Spectrum, remember Spectrum Magazine with a K, not
Hmm.
a C, not a Q. Spectrum Magazine with a K. Check them out on Instagram, Twitter. You said Twitter as well, right?
Yep, yep, we're on Twitter.
And yeah, just look it up on your Google phone, Google computer, and you'll see how awesome the human experience is. I can't stress it enough. People like my buddy Strider here understands my idea, and humans, as much as we may be upset uh, when we do certain things to others or ourselves, or when others do bad things to us, and we get angry at each other, at the end of the day, we realize how amazing humans are. And that is why I always tell you folks out there that I have love for all of you, because we are such amazing creatures, and we are all just a little piece to something bigger and better. So the only way we can get to that goal is to work together. And the only way that we can fix all these issues that we have, not only with yourselves, but with the world you live in, is to open up and talk to us. Again, I encourage all of you to talk on the show. Send us a message here on First Amendment Podcast. The links are on the Anchor and Spotify websites. So you scroll all the way down, hit the links, and you can leave us a nice little message. So I wanted to thank once again Strider for coming in. The information that Strider has given us is great. I mean, a lot of people don't like opening up, like my buddy Strider. So I want you guys to feel encouraged to talk to us, to talk to Strider. Go check out his magazine, and I mean, we're not going to live forever, folks. Tomorrow is not guaranteed.
Mhm.
So, why not live it? Why not live for today? Don't worry about tomorrow. It may not come. Don't worry about yesterday. It's gone. Worry about today. Well, not worry, but live for today, because today is what matters. Without today, nothing else matters, because if you don't have today, well, nothing else matters, right?
Mhm.
Without now, now. And of course, the answer to all the issues is caring, questioning, and love. If you have love for the individual, you'll be you'll work with the with groups, with individuals, and you'll work together to solve problems. Again, Strider, thank you, buddy. I'm gonna have to drag you into the next episode. I'm gonna have to drag you whether you like it or not, because you are a smart man. So the next episode we'll talk about some pretty cool stuff. I'm pretty sure. But thank you again, for coming on this episode and talking about all this cool stuff and enlightening people with all the information that they didn't have, and I'm sure if they did have it, now they're hopefully willing to speak out about it in the future. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming, and please, please don't forget, love each other and live for today. And I will see you next time. Please take care out there. God bless.